I just said, yeah. I think the notification is not come. Please go ahead.
Okay.
Avatar Meher Baba ki jai. My wish. The lover has to keep the wish of the beloved. My wish for my lovers is as follows. 1. Do not shirk your responsibilities. 2. Attend faithfully to your worldly duties, but always keep at the back of your mind that all this is Baba's. 3. When you feel happy, think Baba wants me to be happy. When you suffer, think Baba wants me to suffer. 4. Be resigned to every situation and think honestly and sincerely. Baba has placed me in this situation. 5th, with the understanding that Baba is in everyone, try to help and serve others. 6th, I say with my divine authority to each and all that whosoever takes my name at the time of breathing his last comes to me. So do not forget to remember me in your last moments. Unless you start remembering me from now on, it will be difficult to remember me when your end approaches. You should start practicing from now on. Even if you take my name only once every day, you will not forget to remember me in your dying moments. Avatar Meher Baba ki jai.
Avatar Meher Baba ki jai. Thank you. So here we are on the continued journey where we are on page 50. We start with Chatti Baba. Chatti Baba is the second of the special or favorites of Baba, the favorite five of Baba. So we did Muhammad Mast yesterday, and we'll do Chatti Baba and beyond, hopefully today. Yeah. Any thoughts? Any questions before we start?
Yeah, good to go. Jai Baba.
Jai Baba. Let's go. So I'll probably start for reading for a bit, and then we can rotate as usual. So here's a nice photograph. I think all of us, sometime or the other, would have seen this photograph of Chatti Baba. So this is Chatti Baba at Bangalore, 1940. In this story of Chatti Baba, Avatar Meher Baba ki jai. In this story of Chatti Baba, I've taken the chance of fulfilling two tasks. The first, to describe how Chatti Baba was discovered, and the second, to recount at least some of the episodes of his life with Meher Baba. Before Baba himself goes out to contact Masts, one or more of his men, usually Baidul, Kaka, or Eruch, are sent as envoys to reconnoiter a certain district. Reconnoiter. So I think it's just we can check the meaning. Even yesterday there were a lot of uh
Yes.
yeah, a lot of words that were pretty unusual, new, right? So 1 second. There it is. It's make a military observation of. So I never knew that the word reke came from reconnoiter. I thought it came from reconnaissance, right? So you hear the term, military term reke, right? It's a short, RECCE. I did not know it came from reconnoiter. So anyway, it is what it is. Okay. Before I'll start again. Before Baba himself goes out to contact Mas, one or more of his men, usually Baidul, Kaka, or Eruch, are sent as envoys to reconnoiter a certain district and to select suitable musts for Baba's work. These expeditions of inquiry are no picnic, and because it would be impossible to describe every one of them, I venture to hope that the account of this particular one, which eventually, with Baba's help, ended in bringing Chatti Baba back to the Bangalore ashram, will serve to show the extent of the labors of pre-contacting almost every must listed in the supplement at the end of this book. It shows the double travail. First, that of the reconnaissance party, and finally, that of Baba and a few chosen men. Also, I hope it shows the kind of trophy that such labors sometimes win. For a price, such as Chatti Baba was surely worth the efforts made to get him. So, I think reconnoiter, again to get back to grammar, maybe is the verb and reconnaissance is the noun, right? So I think that's what it is. We can quickly confirm that as well. Reconnoiter verb. Yeah, reconnoit, act of reconnoiting is the noun. Reconnoiter only. Both noun and verb. Okay, all right. Anyway, um, English, English, English. Let's continue. It's minor in our understanding, or it's minor on what happens because of that. So let's continue. One day in Bangalore in November 1939, Bangalore has a footnote, map reference E11. We don't need to go see it. And a map. Yeah, okay. One day in Bangalore in November 1939, Baba sent for Kaka and Eruch and explained that he wanted them to help him gather together a nucleus of advanced musts, and it was to fall to their lot to set out on an immediate expedition in search of such souls. He reminded them that the work at Rahuri had been for the most part with mad people, but that as a model of genuine must, they had the example of Muhammad's presence amongst them. And he asked them to remember how Muhammad behaved, and that in spite of his exacting behavior, there were a number of points of distinction between him and an ordinary madman. He also made it clear that in their search, the cornerstone of their judgment was finally to rest upon an intuitive reaction. You leave that to me, he said, on the intuitive reaction and the identification. Rahuri again has a map reference. Maybe we would do well to see where Rahuri is on the map. D8. So D, and then we have 8. So it's not very far from Ahmednagar. 1, 2. Oh, there it is, Rahuri. So it's near Dahigaon, Pimplegaon, so very close to Mehrabad, right? So here is Rahuri, Mad Ashram, August 1937 to 1937. So this is to be distinguished from the Mast Ashrams that he created later. This is the Mad Ashram, like mentioned in that para before. Let's continue. Another thing he told them was how to approach a must and how to coax him to come away with them. They should, first of all, observe how the local people demonstrated their reverence and then bear themselves in the same way. They must avoid any action that might upset him and should ask any steward or disciple about the fads and fancies of the must, and particularly about any special thing that he was known to enjoy. They should then go and buy something for him, sweetmeats, tea, cigarettes, or whatever might please him, and offer them to him. And finally, with all the arts they knew, they should set out to coax the must to come away with them. There was, however, one injunction, and that was that they were to tell no one, not even the must himself, that Meher Baba had sent them, nor that it was to Meher Baba that they were to bring him. Baba then selected certain places in southern India and told them to search these cities and return to Bangalore precisely and without fail on the 11th day, bringing with them a few first-rate musts. Finally, throughout these 10 days, they were to have only one solid meal a day after sunset, but might take tea twice during the daytime. And so Kaka and Eruch set out, and one imagines them to have had no conception of the spite of fortune that was to dog their footsteps during these 10 days. There was little of import in their journey until they reached Trichinopoli. Trichinopoli is the Western or British pronunciation and spelling for Tiruchirappalli. Tiruchirappalli, I'm sure, has a map reference here. You can quickly see it. It's on the coast, near the coast, southern. There it is, next to Tanjore. And Tanjore and Tiruchirappalli are in the news today, thanks to what's happening in Delhi with the new Sengol, right? And the Chola tradition. So there was little import in their journey until they reached Trichinopoli, where their adventures became rich both in hardships and in the contact of interesting and important spiritual personalities. To begin with, it was pouring with rain, and to add to their trials, the language there was unknown to them, and their Hindi, Urdu, Gujarati, Marathi, and English were apparently useless. By a stroke of fortune, while they were struggling to penetrate the understanding of a group of sympathetic but uncomprehending listeners on the station soon after their arrival, a man elbowed his way forward and introduced himself in Urdu. He was a Muslim of Nagapattinam. Again, the British spelling is what is shown here, Nagapattinam. Nagapattinam is a shrine of, it's famous for a shrine, a dargah of a Sufi master called Hanifa, right? So that's about Nagapattinam. He, the person who elbowed his way forward, was a Muslim of Nagapattinam, a Tonga owner by name Sardar Sahib, and he offered not only to satisfy their inquiries, but also to be their guide. He told Eruch and Kaka that it had been his hobby for years to meet saints and spiritually interesting men of that part of India, and Kaka and Eruch, therefore, after little hesitation, accepted his offer and placed themselves at his disposal. Nagapattinam is, I think, closer to the coast. Yes, there it is. Nagapattinam is, so Nagapattinam is next to Nagore. Nagore is the place where the shrine is, right? So I'm glad I came to the map. So this is all delta-rich, fertile parts of Tamil Nadu, southern Tamil Nadu, and that this is Nagore, and Nagapattinam. Let's continue. Sardar Sahib had come to Tiruchirappalli to collect the car of a landlord of Nagapattinam that had, it seems, been under repair, and he planned that they should return together to Nagapattinam in this car and meet a notable must there by name Moti Baba. Sardar Sahib was enthusiastic for an immediate start, and our two men found it hard to persuade him to allow them first to search Tiruchirappalli itself for the type of must or saint they needed. They succeeded, however, in postponing their departure by a few hours and plodded through the slushy lanes of the Mohammedan quarter of Tiruchirappalli in search of a must called Yusuf. After a protracted search, they failed to find him, so returned to the station to meet Sardar Sahib. The three dirty souls then set out by car to Nagapattinam. It had been raining cats and dogs for several days, and the straight road and the flat fields that lay on either side were almost entirely submerged under melancholy wind-wrinkled sheets of water. At twilight, about 20 miles from Tiruchirappalli, the remaining eyots of land had become entirely shrouded by a waste of waters, and at some sodden wayside village, two farmers were seen wading towards them, calling aloud and gesticulating. After much persuasion, they made it clear to Sardar Sahib that it would be suicidal to proceed further that evening by car, and in the face of the persistent obsecrations of these prudent peasants, it was agreed to turn back. Since there seemed no prospect of success, if they pursued their trans-aqueous course through Nagapattinam. Again, language, new words. We saw eots. Like, I'm very curious about eots. This is also a new word, but we'll ignore it. But we'll see eots. So eots are something to do with land. A small island in a river. Okay. Eots. Oh, the remaining eots of land had become entirely shrouded by a waste of waters. Okay. Obsecration seems some sort of. I think it's the opposite of consecration, right? And so they splashed their way to a neighboring station, and leaving the car in charge of a responsible individual, they boarded a train that was, in fact, the last to pass before the rising waters washed away the line. They reached Nagapattinam in their wet, clinging clothes late the same night. The next day, they devoted to two meetings with Moti Baba, who is a high mast of the sixth plane, and although they failed to persuade him to come with them, their experiences were odd. During the first encounter in the morning, nothing memorable came to pass, and they left with a promise to come back the same evening. At sunset, when they reached the house, they joined a group of disciples and visitors who were awaiting Moti Baba's return. And after some time, his shuffling footsteps were heard approaching, and a hush fell on the gathering. This little old man with bright eyes then stepped up onto the veranda and at once peeled off his wet outer clothes. These were composed of 7 coats and 7 pairs of trousers, which he removed in 2 pieces en bloc, one of 7 coats each within the other, and the other of 7 pairs of trousers invaginated into each other in the same way. He then reclined, covered only by the indefinite folds of an assortment of undergarments, and was silent for a time while he enjoyed several country cigarettes, BDs. Thereafter, he ordered one of his attendants to prepare and bring food. This was placed before them by a man, previously a leper, who had begged Moti Baba to heal him. He had been told to stay as an attendant and rub the dust from Moti's feet every day over the leprous patches, and he was now apparently cured and had devoted his life to the service of the man by whose grace he had been healed. After the meal, Kaka and Iruch, at a moment that seemed propitious, repeated their plea of the morning that Moti Baba should come away for a few days with them. He replied in a strange way. He pointed to his feet, indicating the mud and filth upon them, and told them with a sigh how tired he was, since he had but now returned from a visit to the man who had sent them, and that there was, therefore, no need for him to go with them. Some time later, apparently without rhyme or reason, he lit 3 matches in succession and gave them to Kaka, who, acting on the principle that whatever a saint gives to one should be kept, placed the cinders in his pocket. It was then nearly midnight, and suddenly Moti Baba asked Baba's men to prepare tea for him. The ex-leper, after a hectic search in the city, produced 2 large beakers, one of tea and the other of coffee. Moti then invited the 3 of them to sleep on the floor beside him, but because of the plans that lay ahead, they declined and set out for the station. Kaka feels that they should not have refused this invitation, for he thinks it possible that they might have undergone some memorable spiritual experience. But such a chance, once rejected, is not offered a second time. From Nagapattinam, the party set out early the next day to meet Chatti Baba. They were told that he was usually to be found on the highway near Nagapattinam, and as he was held in great esteem throughout the countryside, our 3 men did not experience much difficulty in running him to earth. This lovable old man of fresh and simple mien was dressed only in a lungi and carried a small pitcher and a bundle of rags. The country words for these are chatti and mutta. So small pitcher is chatti. Chatti is, pitcher is nothing but a pot, and chatti is actually referring to a earthenware pot in Tamil. Earthenware as in terracotta pot, right? So small pitcher and a bundle of rags. Mutta is a word I don't recognize, but yeah, that's bundle of rags. And for this reason, he was known locally as Chatti Baba or Mutta Baba. And there was a footnote for lungi. I think it's a note for Westerners. A lungi is a loin cloth fastened at the waist that reaches to the mid calf or ankle. Well, it's alternates between mid calf and ankle as a very important gesture in southern India. So it's the start of a conversation. It's the change of mood. Anything is represented by the change of position of the lungi from mid calf to ankle, right? So that's I think. People who have worn lungis know about this. It is commonly worn in South India. Yeah, let's continue. Remembering Baba's words, the three first paused at a little distance and observed how the country people greeted him. Chatti Baba was then making his way slowly along the margin of a busy highway, and almost all the peasants who passed threw themselves full length before him. Chatti Baba would take a pinch of dust from the ground and offer it to each one, and they would rub their dust upon their foreheads or sprinkle it over their hair. Chatti Baba said finally to each one laughingly, Po Anna Po, go brother go. And each lit and swarthy peasant, rising to his feet with much reverence, would then dismiss himself and go about his business. Kaka, Eruch, and Sardar Sahib then approached Chatti Baba and laid themselves before him as they had seen the peasants do. To each of them, Chatti Baba gave a pinch of dust, which they rubbed on their foreheads, and they then set about inviting him to come with them to Bangalore. Sardar Sahib, as interpreter, offered the suggestion in his most telling manner, but to their mortification, Chatti Baba rejoined in a melancholy way that he had much work here amongst his children and would not come now, though he might do so after a few days. The three men, the three then repaired in a mood of disappointment to Nagapatnam, and having visited another mast at Nagore with fingernails the length of cigarettes, they prepared to return to Tiruchirappalli. So Nagore again has a map reference. We already saw it. The railroad from Nagapatnam to Tiruchirappalli passes through the ancient city of Tanjore. That's the traditional way of pronouncing Tanjore. Tanjore is closer to Tiruchirappalli, right? So that's where the famous Brihadishwara temple, Chola temple is there. So you might recognize it if I show you a photograph. Yeah, there it is. So everybody's seen this temple, right? So this is Tanjore, right? So Tanjore as called in the British terms. The railroad from Nagapatnam to Tiruchirappalli passes through the ancient city of Tanjore, and on the Cis and Tanjaurian sections of the line, the floods had bitten out and swallowed large sections of the permanent way. This is the railroad line. Trains were running to the margin of the first breach, which was teeming with stranded passengers. Eruch Kaka and Sardar Sahib decided that rather than join these crowds for an uncertain period waiting for the line to be repaired, uncertain because of the relentless and desolating rainfall that still continued, they would wade across the inundated tract. They therefore slipped off their trousers and shoes and, turning amphibious pilgrims, waded across 6 miles of a submerged countryside to relatively dry land. Here, they fortunately found refuge in a bus that carried them to Tanjore, where they at once resumed their search for Mas. There was a Mast here by name Abdul Qadir Jilani, who had the reputation of having Gauss-like qualities. Well, I was going to ask a quiz. In all our slides yesterday, we missed Gauss, but Gauss is not in the hierarchy, right? But Gauss is mentioned. Anybody wants to tell me what Gauss is from memory? I'm sure somebody may remember.
Yeah, it is used in it.
Yeah,
This word also comes in a lot of Qawwalis actually.
correct. So Gauss is a person.
Gauss-e-Azam. Yeah.
Yeah, so Gauss is a person or type of mask or advanced soul that is able to remove parts of his body and put them back. So that's specifically the attribute of a Gauss, right? So just uh, for reference. So who had the reputation of having Gauss-like qualities, and as time was running short, they decided to visit him in the dead hours before dawn. They found him resting on the porch of a butcher's house, his usual habitation, and as soon as Eruch and Kaka came before him, he raised upturned hands to his beard in a gesture of reverence and exclaimed in a gentle voice full of feeling, Meher Baba, Meher Baba. They offered him the respects, but unhappily failed in persuading him to accompany them, although he, like Chatti Baba, gave his word that he would come later for a few days. And so, in a mood dimmed by the melancholy of this third failure to persuade a Must to join them, they set about preparing to return to Tiruchirappalli. So, they failed with Moti Baba, they failed with Chatti Baba, and they failed with Abdul Qadir Jilani. Again, the line was breached and the intervening expanse flooded, and neither buses nor trains were able to run. They succeeded, however, in getting a lift in the inspection bogie of a ballast train to the margin of the first breach. Here, there was another teeming multitude of stranded passengers, amongst whom disease was already taking its toll. There was no fresh water, and the stocks of food from the adjacent villages had already been exhausted except for green plantains that were baked or fried and had become the only source of nourishment. For 36 hours, our three men shared the plight of this crowd, and then concluded that it would be better to risk making their own way across the inundated tract. They therefore again stripped off their nether garments and, taking two coolies to carry their bedding rolls, set out to wade across 16 miles of flooded country. They followed the course of the disrupted railway, over fallen bridges, and the disorderly rubble of crumbled culverts clinging here and there to the lines dangling in midair. The rain had at last stopped, and the water had subsided sufficiently to make their passage possible, although it was still up to their knees. And late in the afternoon, they staggered into a drenched and miserable station at the other extremity of the bridge. Here, Erich discovered the station master to be an old school friend who recognized the muddy, wet, and weary Erich from a little distance. It so happened that the station master's house was set upon a piece of high ground and was the only building there that had not been flooded. The station master shouted across the stretch of mud and water that separated his house from the station, where Eruch Kaka and Sardar Sahib were standing, that he would prepare tea and would call them across when it was ready. After an interval, presumably sufficient for the brewing of tea, he beckoned to them to join him, but advised them to make their passage through the water that lay between, and not cross a ridge of mud that was above the water, and seemed therefore to offer the better route. One of the three, however, ignoring this warning, made his way through the mud and found his legs sinking deeper and deeper into an all consuming quagmire. After a breathtaking struggle, he pulled his legs out and, throwing dignity to the winds, he then lay on his stomach on the surface of the mud and propelled himself horizontally to safety. He reached the station master's hut, not only covered in mud from head to foot, like a buffalo emerging from a village pond, but also in a mood of the most profound disgust. He found that the tea, which had been prepared by the station master under great difficulties, was proffered in an old tin used normally for certain intimate cleaning purposes, for the very good reason that every other utensil had been swept from this isolated kitchen by the flood. The precious beverage offered him in such a vessel became then the last straw that broke the back of his restraint, and he directed a tirade of invective at this unspeakable tin of tea, for the sake of which he had straddled across a span of purgatorial slime and only narrowly escaped being consumed by it. Fortunately, Maya, in her dual forms of good and evil, eventually passes away, and later, the same evening, they commandeered a bullock cart which bore them to the blessed refuge of Tiruchirappalli. Here, they left Sardar Sahib, their indefatigable companion and guide throughout the trying days and nights since they had first left Tiruchirappalli, and having made a flying but barren diversion to Rameshwaram, they returned empty in heart and hand to Bangalore. So Rameshwaram is further south in the coast. Yesterday we heard the word Kirakarai, that is here. Uh, Rameshwaram is not on the map. Rameshwaram is the closest point to Sri Lanka, so it will be somewhere here. Somewhere here is Rameshwaram. So Rameshwaram has something else in the footnote, I think. Oh, there's a number, but there's no footnote.
No,
That's
there is
strange.
something.
No, there's nothing. Oh, yeah, not on map. Sorry. Not on map, but is near the tip of the narrow peninsula leading to the Adams Bridge, and it's about 30 miles east of Kilakarai, whose map reference is E13. So we just saw it. Rameshwaram is one of the great places of Hindu pilgrimage. It's a Shiva temple, and it also had a train line. So all this makes so much sense. So this is all the Delta region. So that's why it's getting flooded in the monsoon. And the rail line actually goes. It used to run from Chennai to Colombo, and the train used to stop at the last point on the coast, past Rameshwaram. I'm struggling to remember the name of the station. Then the railways used to organize a boat service that took you across the river, the straits of the Park Straits, and you cross over to to Sri Lanka, and then there's a train waiting for you, taking you down to Colombo. So this was the British days. That station, by the way, got washed out in the tsunami. And in fact, the government has decided not to build it back. So it's just an abandoned station. Let's continue. In view of the devastation from the floods, it would have needed a superhuman ability on the part of Erich and Kaka to have brought even one mast with them across the hazards that had lain across their path from Nagapattinam. Considering the hardships they underwent, for one should not forget that they were to eat solid food only after sunset, it was possibly indeed a real blessing that they had no muss with them to add to their burdens. For at the best of times, the unpredictable foibles of a must call for heroic patience. Baba then, in view of the failure of Kaka and Eruch to succeed in their mission, set out from Bangalore at the head of a group of disciples to contact those musts whom Kaka and Eruch had seen, and if possible to bring one or more with them back to the ashram. Baba, Kaka, Eruch, Jal, Kerawala, and Gustaji, passing through Tiruchirappalli, where Yusuf was contacted, repaired without eventful incident to Nagapattinam. The last stage was by taxi, for although the floods had subsided, the railway was still under repair. The contact with Moti Baba was established with little obstacle. Baba washed his feet, fed him, and sat in silence with him for a short while in a hotel where the necessary preparations had been made. The grand old Chatti Baba was not, however, to be easily enticed into the net of the divine master, and it was only by the patience and insistence of those sent in search of him that he was finally brought into the presence of Baba. Saints of titanic stature seldom pay heed to the blandishments and invitations of ordinary folk, and they do not normally leave their environment at the request of anyone. It is only the pull of a greater spiritual force that sometimes compels them to forsake what may have been their routine and abode of many years. This tug of war between two great spiritual forces was in bold relief in the case of Chatti Baba and was a feature of the relationship between him and Baba throughout their 2 years of intimacy. Three of Baba's disciples set out in two taxis to the usual sector of the highway where Chatti Baba was known to be found, about 5 miles from the city of Nagapattinam. He at first utterly declined their invitations to sit in one of the cars and walked miserably ahead of them, carrying his bundle and his chatti, until by reason of fatigue he sat down by the roadside. They then again entreated him with all their gentleness and charm to come with them, even just for a little while, and he finally agreed, and sitting in one of the taxis was brought to the hotel and at once given food. In Nagapattinam itself, he seems to have acquiesced in all that Baba asked of him, and he agreed to go to Bangalore. The party thereupon set out in two cars to Tanjavur, where they arrived at sundown and settled themselves for the night in a dharamshala. Note for Westerners, dharamshala is a free hospice for travelers. It's usually founded and supported by the charity of a philanthropist. During the night, Chatti Baba was restless, and at 2 a.m., he told them that he was hungry. Kaka prepared a meal for him then and there at Baba's behest with supplies and impedimenta that they had with them. After the meal, Chatti Baba, having expressed a desire to go for a walk, set out in the obscure light before dawn with Jal Kerawala as companion. About 4 hours later, the two had not returned, but Jal sent back a desperate note to Baba by a messenger that Chatti Baba was ceaselessly wandering about the city's lanes and would not turn his steps towards the dharamshala. Kaka thereupon went by taxi to the place where Jal had sent this urgent note, and he also tried and failed to coax Chatti Baba to rejoin the party. The two of them then followed the old man for miles, away beyond the sabulous and ramish purlieus of the city, into the first fresh strips of countryside. New word. I think this is turning out to be the most rich English literature in Baba world. We thought C.D. Deshmukh and C. Purdom are the epitomes of Baba English, but here Don does even better.
This is written by Baba, right? So all English words by Baba, it's too.
No. This is written by Don. I mean William Donkins.
Okay.
William Dawkins. So stinking, ramish, ill-flavored. So it's a vulgar. So right in the first page of searching this word, I see Wayfarers because that's coming from the book. So it's a very rare usage,
Very
and
rare.
it very rare usage. So there's only in the first page itself, Wayfarers is showing up in the part one. So it's basically something to do with stink, and then before you get to the outskirts, the stinky part of the city. That's what he wants to refer to. The two of them then followed the old man for miles away beyond the sabulous and ramish purlieus of the city. What does sabulous mean?
That's
Fabulous.
rhyming fabulous.
Yeah.
I thought so.
Sabulous means being sandy or gritty. Okay. Wow. The two of them then followed the old man for miles away beyond the sabulous and ramish purlieus of the city into the first fresh strips of countryside. Here, at last, Chatti Baba sat down by the roadside through sheer exhaustion and for some reasons of his own gave Jal 10 annas, telling him that these were his wages for having come so far with him. Kaka, by now dusty, weary, and desperate, told Chatti Baba that he would either take him back to his home or to Bangalore, but would not, under any circumstances, leave him here by a strange wayside. This ultimatum fortunately broke the spell of his contumacy and Chatti Baba was brought into one of the cars and carried back at last to the shaded courts of the Dharamshala. One more word.
See.
Contumacy is stubborn refusal. So that's what, yeah, stubborn refusal to obey or comply with authority, especially disobedience to, oh, so from the word comes contempt, especially disobedience to a court order or summons. So from contumacy comes contempt. Okay, during these hours of waiting, Baba had seized the opportunity to contact Abdul Qadir Jilani.
Page is
Yeah.
not properly visible now.
Yeah. During these hours of waiting, Baba had seized the opportunity to contact Abdul Qadir Jilani, the sixth plain ghost-like mast in Tanjore, and then came back to await the return of the truant Chatti Baba. As soon as Chatti Baba was brought back to the Dharamshala, Baba gave him a bath with about 50 buckets of water and thereafter fed him. One of the striking features of Chatti Baba's sojourn with Baba was this daily bathing with torrents of water, and the precedent was initiated in the Dharamshala at Tanjavur. From Tanjavur, the party went to Tiruchirappalli, where they picked up Yusuf and then set out for Bangalore. They settled in a small third-class apartment, and at one station, obviously to railway bylaws, Chatti Baba was given was given a lavish bath in the compartment. So, and at one station, oblivious to railway bylaws, you're not supposed to have a bath and use water in the bathroom for bathing. But then, oblivious to the bylaws, Chatti Baba was given a bath. There is a refreshing incident related about Chatti Baba at a certain station where the party had some hours to while away. Baba was apparently busy in the town searching for Masts, and those with Chatti Baba decided to enjoy a substantial meal. In Indian fashion, as soon as the food was brought up from the refreshment room, the group settled on the platform, and thinking it would be appropriate that Chatti Baba should serve food to each one, the Mandli placed the dishes and plates in front of him. Now, there is a sour juice loved greatly by southern Indians, spiced particularly with tamarind and all manner of fiery condiments, that is known as rasam. And Chatti Baba, like a true son of South India, loved rasam from the depth of his heart. As the dishes of rice, dal, vegetables, puris, and so forth were arranged before him, he scrutinized each in turn and discovered that one brass vessel was brimful of rasam. Before serving the party, he took up this vessel in one hand and, chortling at those sitting about him, he transferred the vessel round his portly body and placed it on the ground behind his back. Having served himself and the mandali with the dishes that remained, he then took up the vessel of rasam from behind his back and, laughing again, threw back his head, held the vessel over his mouth, and poured its entire contents down his throat. That done, he laughed for the third time, a laugh pregnant with satisfaction at the rasam itself and at his successful ruse, and then set to with the others for the rest of the meal, which, if we exclude the rasam, was equably divided amongst all. This sense of fun, or if you prefer it, this childlike trait of selfishness, coupled with his occasional flashes of anger, gave a tang and savor to the sweetness of his nature and made him at once both formidable and lovable. When the party returned to Bangalore, Chatti Baba was at once lodged in the special mast ashram, and a routine of regular bathing and feeding was set in motion. Each bath was a prodigious performance for which about 50 buckets of water were used. The bathing was after the Indian fashion, in which the bather squats in a small room, the floor of which is drained by its slope and by an outlet at its most dependent point. The bather decants water in a small vessel from a bucket at his side, soaps himself, and finally, by douching water all over his body with the small vessel, washes away all vestiges of soap. This time-honored and effective system is always used when musts are bathed by Baba, the only difference being that for a must such as Chatti Baba, there is no semblance of privacy. He is soaped and rinsed by Baba and is surrounded by those who bring the water, hand the soap, and hold the towel and the dry clothes. In other words, Baba actually bathes the must and others dry him and dress him. Apart from the poorly lit and domestic atmosphere of the bathroom, the concentrated vivacity of the scene suggests the progress of a surgical operation, the patient being patient because he is a must, anesthetized to any sense of impropriety, and the assistants too busy in their immediate tasks to take more than a technical and impersonal interest in what is going on. So the scene is like a operation theater. Everybody's just doing their bit. Everybody's busy, and here's this man in anesthesia getting bathed. I mean, anesthesia-like state. When called to be bathed, it was usual for Chatti Baba to demur, saying that he was not well, and at times he would mildly abuse those sent to summon him from his room. But if Baba himself went to call him, he at once smiled and laughed in the attractive manner of a child, and after a little hesitant humming and hawing, he would follow Baba meekly to the bathroom. At first, in Bangalore, it seemed as if the presence of Baba, his men, and other musts upset Chatti Baba, and he used to edge along the slit between the back of one of the huts and the garden wall, a damp, a crepuscular uh, alley rank with a braiding of weeds. He would sit alone in this alley, murmuring, laughing, and making signs on the ground, apparently happy in his seclusion and free to do as he wished, away from the others. There's another photograph. Chatti Baba makes signs in the ground with the index finger of his left hand. This is a typical gesture of a Jamali type of must. On that note, we forgot the last slide. I think I was not able to see the slides. I was seeing it on my mobile and talking. So there was one more slide with the 8 types of musts, which we can see at some time later, which you have also seen on the other day when I first came up with it.
Oh,
Okay, so anybody wants to continue? I thought this is ending and I kept pushing it more than I would have
yes.
liked. Yeah. So you want to, somebody wants to pick up from here?
Yes, I will read
Please,
for
Jai
some.
Baba. Jai Baba. Baba, it's your
Baba, who minutely attentive to the whims of his must, seeing the discomfort that Chatti Baba endured to achieve seclusion, arranged a hut for him in which he could remain alone. A monumental bed was placed in his hut upon which he was invited to rest or sleep should he so desire. Chatti Baba, however, who was no uh, voluptuary and whose mattress had hitherto been the unyielding earth, would not dispose himself upon the bed until repeatedly invited and encouraged by Baba, and eventually, after using it in deference to Baba's pleas for a few days, he reverted to squatting and sleeping on the ground and to sitting alone in the alley behind the hut. The area of the garden reserved for the Master Ashram was bounded by a fence of Satya. Don't know what is Satya. Uh, Note for the Westerners, Satya is matting or screening woven from strips of sliced bamboo. It is used for matting, screening, or making walls, baskets, etc.
Yeah, it's also called chatai. Chatai. North we called it chatai.
Satya, okay.
Yeah, chatai. Yeah.
Voluptuary, concerned with the character or with the character. Okay. Luxury or sensual pleasure. Okay. The area of the garden reserved for the area of the garden reserved for the must ashram was bounded by a fence of Satya, and its dimensions cannot have been more than 30 yards square. In order, therefore, that the must should have no feeling of boredom or confinement, Baba was constantly attentive to their wishes and did all he could to keep them amused. A tea shop was designed and executed with elaborate carelessness to conform to the preferences of Mus for derelict houses of refreshment. It was built of tatya and furnished with 2 or 3 claudicating tables and 3 or 4 old benches. Tea, pan, tobacco, cigarette, and bidis were all at times available free on demand to any of the must. A lead from the nearest circuit supplied electric light, and a hand-painted notice upon an old board nailed over the front advised the establishment as the Must Hotel. Looks like Taj Hotel. The atmosphere was genuinely suggestive of the meaner sort of restaurant to be found by the score in the poorer parts of the teeming cities of India. This special must ashram, of which Chatti Baba was the dominant figure, eventually housed 6 or 7 musts, mostly from southern India, and has been described in another part of this volume. The various musts, with their individual characteristics, each contributed to the gaiety and vivid atmosphere of the institution, and they would foregather at any hour of the day or night in the Must Hotel and demand tea, cigarette, pan, or whatever took their fancy. Before the hotel was opened, Chatti Baba kept himself mostly to himself. And passed the greater part of the day in the solitude of the dank passageway. When, however, the hotel grew to be the social center of the ashram, Chatti Baba used to stand before it sometimes for hours, obviously vastly amused by the conduct of his fellow monks. Some 2 weeks after Chatti Baba was brought to Bangalore, the singer was sent for from Ahmednagar. At appointed hours, Baba would gather all the monks into his own room, and a special coach was provided for Chatti Baba. For the first 3 or 4 days, Chatti Baba attended these informal concerts, and as songs followed songs, tears of ecstasy would well over the rims of his eyelids and course down his cheeks. After these first 3 or 4 days, he ceased to join these concerts, and it seems as if the pain of the joy of listening was too much, so that he preferred to remain outside. Baba has never, as far as I know, explained why, when he sits with a must, he insists upon the rigid exclusion of anyone else. It is, however, possible from an experience related by Erich during this period of Chatti Baba's stay at Bangalore that there is a tangible physical danger in interrupting him at such a time. Baba had several times tried to persuade Chatti Baba to sit alone with him in his room, and after many refusals, Chatti Baba one day agreed. The two were closeted in silence in Baba's room for about 2 hours, and at the end of the period, Eric, hearing Baba's movements to open the door, got up and released the clasp from the outside. Chatti Baba then emerged and rushed past him on his way to his own room. As he went past, Eric tells how he felt a palpable and excruciating shock pass through his body, similar, he says, to an electric shock. There are many traditions in India about the danger of interrupting saints in a transcendental state of consciousness, and perhaps this experience was a sip of the dregs of the power that had been at its highest potential while the two had been in conference. At the beginning of April 1940, Baba and his group moved lock, stock and barrel to Mehrabad. Baba, with the lion's share of those who had been with him in Bangalore, travelled by car along a devious and fascinating route over mountains and valleys, touching here and there at coastal centers such as Karwar and Goa, and reached Mehrabad at the beginning of May. Chatti Baba with fellow Masts was sent by train to Ahmednagar and was already installed in a special room on the hill when Baba arrived. The daily bathing routine was at once resumed, and every day 150 to 200, yes, move the page, buckets of water were used for each bath. As before, Chatti Baba must always be coaxed to the bathroom, but once there would sit gurgling, sighing and laughing gently as bucket after bucket of water was tossed over him. An idiosyncrasy of Chatti Baba was a distaste for having his hair dried. He had an impressive head of tousled black hair flecked with grey, thickly matted and long enough to reach over his ears. Every day, usually following his bath, he would sit in any place where loose earth was to be found, and rising cupped hands laden with soil would release it over his head. It affected one strangely to see this old man toss handful after handful of soil over his bowed head and watch the crumbling fragments of earth tumble over his shoulders to the ground. It seemed as if he must be suffering in a way that we might never fathom, and that this apparently childish play soothed and gave him comfort. In view of this habit, Baba had instructed Krishna, who was his personal attendant, to put 15 baskets of earth on Chatti Baba's room every day. This reminds me of, say, elephants after being bathed, go out and put a lot of mud on their body. Prior to his spiritual awakening, Chatti Baba had apparently been a station master, and the memories of his earlier profession would be revived from time to time in disjointed ways. He used, for example, to tap out Morse message with his hook that held his window, and at irregular hours of the night or day, he would shout orders in English or Tamil to imaginary railway subordinates, as if he were digging some rusty relic out of the depths of his memory. At other times, he would call out, Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar. God is most great, God is most great. He used to say that Baba was his elder brother, and he one day told Krishna that Baba was a great and rich man, and that there was no one like him in the whole world. The period at Mehrabad in 1940 was the black hour of devastating and terrible occasion in Europe when France fell. I do not want to suggest that the incident I am about to describe proves that Baba, in his work with Masts, influences the current of world events, but I believe it shows at least the great saints are in harmony with humanity and suffer with them in their hours of agony and trial. Baba has said clearly that in his contacts with Masts, they help him and he helps them. They love him and he loves them, and he agrees that the speculations of his disciples about the significance of his work are correct up to a certain point, but beyond this he does not extend his explanation. What each must does for Baba is a private matter between Baba and the Mast that does not concern us. He has said that his work is similar to that of Mehrabad school. That of the Mehrabad school in the mid-20s, but that they must, before, because of their advanced state, know what they are doing for him and are therefore of great help to him. For several weeks in Mehrabad, Chatti Baba had repeatedly told Krishna that the people of Europe were undergoing great sorrow and suffering, but that they would survive to enjoy happy days again. Chatti Baba, though illiterate, never, as far as anyone knew, read a newspaper, and he was apparently quite out of touch with current events of any sort. But in spite of this, he seemed aware of the terrible things that were then going on in Europe. He said one day while pouring earth over his head that there would be much anguish and privation, and that many would die of starvation, but that Baba would finally assuage the suffering of the bird. One night of 9th June 1940, Chatti Baba became suddenly violent, noisy, and abusive, and emerged in a state of disorder and frenzy from his little room. He went directly to Baba's room and declared that his house had now been utterly destroyed and that he had come for shelter to Baba. If that remark were literal, it made no sense at all, since his little room was as it always had been, small and bare, but neat and whole, a place where he was usually happy to sit alone for hours. Baba at once gave orders for the two to be left alone together, and Chatti Baba for some hours was heard chattering and expostulating with Baba. Eventually, he became quiet and spent the rest of the night alone with Baba.
Let's take
The
a pause
following,
here. Let's take a
yes,
pause
yes.
here and actually take a look at that date, right? So what happened on the 9th of June in France in 1940? Let's see what happened. So it was the time of the assault, Battle of France, resulted in the capture and subjugation of not only France, but three other countries, Luxembourg, Netherlands, and Belgium. The Battle of Calabria was fought in the Mediterranean Sea of the coast of Italy. It ended indecisively. So this is not France. June 1940, the French, so this is what it is. The French government actually fled Paris, right? So if you see here, my house is on fire or the house is destroyed is what he says. So on that Sunday, the French government actually fled and gave up on Paris. Okay. And the whole battle finishes on 22nd June, but the actual loss of Paris is on 9th of June, represented by what we just read. Okay.
Okay.
We start from here.
Following morning, he was quieter and repaired to his own little chamber, and Baba then explained that Chatti Baba, who had a spiritual connection with France, had been overwrought with despair because of the cataclysm that was overwhelming France during these few fateful days. The reader will perhaps need reminding that the collapse of French armies began about 5th June and that the Germans entered Paris 8 days later on 13th June. Okay. In July 1941, Chatti Baba accompanied Baba and his group to Ranchi, and the history of Chatti Baba's connection with Baba from this time until his final return to Nagapattinam is one of the living one of living with Baba in various cities of India and Ceylon. The journey between each place was usually an oppressive, apprehensive event, for Chatti Baba almost always made one or more attempts at evading the party and was especially difficult to settle in any room prepared for him. At Ranchi, the party arrived at the house with bag and baggage, and everyone began at once settling themselves. In the midst of this confusion, Chatti Baba behaved like a child, unwilling to go to bed, weeping a little, turning about, wandering hither and thither, deaf to the pleas of those sent to coax him into a simple room, little room that Baba had selected for him. This went on for 2 hours until, apparently tired of further resistance, he at last reluctantly and a little sullenly, like an unruly child, allowed himself to be shown to his room. In Ranchi, the usual routine was continued, but in spite of the efforts of Baba to make Chatti Baba feel at home, he seemed restless and declared that great troubles lay upon him. Baba, who is all too rarely communicative about his mess, told the Mandli one day in Ranchi that there was no equal to Chatti Baba in the whole world, and that he was inestimable for help he gave him in his work, for the help he gave him in his work. The moods of this great man were extraordinary and would fluctuate from a sunny expansiveness to a truculent attitude without apparently much provocation. He was like a child, quick to change for a very little thing, but he had a bewitching enchantment about him that made him loved by all. The other important must have all had their charm and some sort of disposition that made them attractive, but there has been no one who has so unanimously commanded the affection of others. In this way, Chatti Baba was unique, and today, years after he had been separated from Baba, the Mandli and Baba himself often recall with delight his little ways and especially the lightness and captivating spell of his laugh. Baba has since explained that Chatti Baba was a perfect Jamali Mas with a few traits of Jalali and was a very high Mas of the sixth plane. From Ranchi, then, since Chatti Baba was manifestly ill at ease there, one would have thought him happy to return to Mehrabad, since from his remarks it seems as if the place itself made him unhappy. This, however, was not so, as the description of the difficulties in getting him back to Mehrabad will show. This mood of misery must therefore have been related to his spiritual work that was obviously associated with his contact with Baba. On the return journey to Mehrabad, there was little difficulty in taking Chatti Baba and his fellow Masts of Ranchi ashram to the railway station, although this entailed a bus journey of some 60 miles. The station itself was unimportant and lay on the main line between Calcutta and Bombay. The combined operation of finding accommodation in the dark and of offloading the personnel and disjecta membra of luggage had to be completed within 20 minutes, the scheduled halt of the train. To make confusion worse confounded, disjecta membra. Can you check on that? Also written in fragments shattered fragments and is used to refer to surviving fragments of ancient poetry manuscripts. Oh, what all.
A really colorful usage of words here. So he's referring to the luggage, and
Luggage.
I am reminded of the old train journeys where we all used to travel so heavy, have 10, 15 bags surrounding us, and then, that's the scene he's trying to describe.
Yes, yes.
Yeah.
So this also reminds what all, say, fancy collections we carry around and keep it at home. And when we change places, we carry them.
We have to move with that, yes.
We discard a few, carry some.
Every time, yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Disjecta membra of luggage had to be completed within 20 minutes, the scheduled halt of the train. To make confusion worse confounded, the incalculable Chatti Baba refused to board the train and sat on platform, his back to the train, obstinate and tearful, his sheet thrown over his head. Various members of the Mandi tried and tried again, separately and in unison, to bring Chatti Baba to the compartment, but every plea was met by a more set refusal. At the end of 20 minutes, which to us had seemed but a pause between two breaths, the guard's whistle rang in our ears, and his green light waved to and fro in the crowded darkness at the tail of the platform. The train, with creeping and majestic acceleration, began to move out of station, and at a lightning conference, Baidul, Kotwal, and I decided to leave our baggage with the rest of the party and remain with Chatti Baba. When our gaze turned from the dwindling crimson disk of the train's rear lamp to poor Chatti Baba, we found him still hunched on the platform, his sheet thrown over his head. He was weeping unaffectedly like a child who can only express his misery and despair in this way. One felt as if a stone lay somewhere between one's heart and the pit of one's stomach, for the sight of this veteran come to such a pass moved all three of us to an acute sense of his misery. Sorry. Baidul and Kakam, who have probably done more must work than any other, believe that they are only able to bring must with them if Baba gives them the key. This key they hold to be a sort of unseen compulsion that obliges the must to come with them, even against his inclinations. Perhaps the key was not then with us, or the lock for the time being out of order, for we had to resort to despicable device to bring Chatti Baba with us. I nevertheless believe that, in spite of Chatti Baba's anxiety to evade us, we were justified in our persistence, because it would have been feeble and unkind to have left this dear old man on a railway platform at least 900 miles from his home. The following day, after having sat in the same position on the platform throughout the night, he again refused to board the next train, and we only succeeded in getting him into a compartment by persuading a policeman to chivvy him into it, not by physical unkindness, but by the liberal use of customary constable's bluster. This, however, was far from the end of the episode, for we had unhappily chosen one of those drowsy trains that meander across the endless Indian landscape and stop at every station for anything from 15 minutes to 2 hours. Throughout that day, at every station, and from time to time when the train was moving more than usual slowly, Chatti Baba pushed his way to one or the other of the doors and tried to get out. Baidul sat guard at one door and I sat at the other, and we had to face not only the resentment of Chatti Baba but also the disapproval of other move the page. Other passengers who thought our restrictions on Chatti Baba a breach of his right of liberty. This tedious journey lasted 3 days, though on each successive day Chatti Baba became a little easier to manage and was occasionally in a happy mood. Our moods responded more or less to his, and we felt gay and thankful when he was happy, in spite of the filth and fatigue of our bodies. Poor Kotwal developed acute dysentery on the second day, and because of our preoccupation with Chatti Baba, we were not able to offer him either much sympathy or much help. In spite of this, he bore the pain and weakness with a stoical patience. The tattered party, faces grimly with sweat, dust, and unshaven stubble, reached the heaven of Meherabad on the fourth day, and Chatti Baba, like all these Mus who seemed indifferent to sleep and food, was by far the freshest of all. For the next 3 months, Chatti Baba stayed at Meherabad, and daily baths were carried out with great quantities of water than ever. It was at this period that he began to pour earth over his head before being bathed, and it was always difficult to persuade him to come to the bathroom, but once there, he would sit chuckling and gurgling happily while buckets after bucket of water was poured over him. For during this period, he was bathed with about 200 buckets of water every day. At this period also, he developed a voracious and insatiable appetite, and however much food was given to him, and this was no mean quantity in those plentiful days before ration cards. He repeatedly asked for more and repeatedly complained that he was not getting enough to eat. At the beginning of November 1940, Baba set out on a series of journeys, going first to Ceylon and thence to various cities in India, in order to spare the readers the indigestible fare of place names and dates. These are not given in much detail in this chapter, but in the small map of India in the right lower corner of the large map at the end of the book, the reader may acquaint himself with the sequence and dates of the various places of stay. On all these journeys, Chatti Baba accompanied Baba and his party up till the time that he returned to Nagapattinam in September 1941. In Ceylon, the group stayed first for a few days in the shady presence of a coconut plantation, and Chatti Baba, who used to ordinarily to be bathed every day by Baba, said that as Baba had brought much trouble upon him, he would now bathe Baba. And so for about a week, Chatti Baba actually bathed Baba every day with 10 or 12 buckets of water. A short while later, the whole group moved to a house on the mountain slope of a tea estate in the hills around Kandy, and for some strange reason, Chatti Baba's mood now became quixotic and labile. One afternoon, without any apparent provocation, he flew into a rage such as no one had ever seen, broke every pane of the glass in his room, threw everything out of it, and began beating the ground with a broom. Baba was sent for, but Chatti Baba locked himself in his room and shouted out that he was feeling unwell, telling Baba to go away. But like a passing thunder shower, this mood soon cleared to his unusual sunny joviality, and in the evening, when Baba brought him his supper, the door was thrown wide open, and Chatti Baba laughed in his gentle way. Perhaps like this strange critical explosion in Meherabad at times of crumbling of France, Chatti Baba was again feeling the pulse of the suffering world, for he would often cry out, "Save them, oh, save them." Another time he said, "I am very poor. Whatever I have is with my big brother." This remark was taken as referring to Baba, whom he always spoke of as his big brother. Can someone continue from here? My throat is sticky.
Yeah, sure. Sanjay ji or Ashish, I think. Anybody?
Yeah. I can read.
Yeah, go ahead.
So where I could, yeah.
From this
You,
time forth,
yeah. From this time forth, although he was docile and accommodating most of the time, and followed Baba wherever he has taken without much resistance, he seems occasionally to have felt that the time for his release was drawing closer. In Calicut, he used often to say, "I won't stay, I must go. I'm almost drowned, I must go." And then these moods would pass, and he would be as charming and loving as ever, and seemingly happy to carry on. On the journey from Calicut to Jaipur, the party had to change trains at Madras, and Chatti Baba had further transient attack of non-cooperation and took it into his head to sit on the platform close to the engine. And took it into his head to sit on the platform close to the engine. Whence no one could dislodge him, the engine driver and his fireman, intrigued at the sight of so many of the Mandali doing their best to get Chatti Baba onto the train, climbed down from their cab and came and added their persuasion. This seemed to turn the scales of Chatti Baba's mood, and he was coaxed with their help into a compartment. Okay. In the house at Jaipur, Chitti Baba used to sit all night long, naked to the west, in the open courtyard under the brilliant stars of the bitter January nights. Those of us sleeping upstairs under the warmth of three or four blankets would hear him laughing, engaging in occasional soliloquies, and often muttering loudly, "Thanda hai." Note on large map as an agreeable hill town in the center of Ceylon. Center of
So
Ceylon.
let's just go to the map and explore a little bit. So it's not on the map. Kandy is a hill town. It's what do you call eastern? I mean a hill station in
Karthik, reduce the page size so that there will be a block here, I think, on the left.
yeah, I'm coming to that. Merge. Yeah, so this is what we had to read. These are the trips that happened in that period, which
Okay.
he refers to. So we need not read, but at least let's see the dates roughly quickly. So August
Sure.
12th, 1939 to April 1st, 1940, Bangalore, we saw that. May 2nd, 1940 to July 3rd, 1940, Mehrabad. Then July 5th, 1940 to July 18th, 1940, Ranchi. July 25th, 1940 to November 1st, Mehrabad. November 5th, 1940 to November 15th, Vayangoda. November 16th, 1940 to December 8th, 1940, Kandi. December 9th or 10th, 1940 to December 23rd, 1940, Calicut. We have not come there. December 26th, 1940 to 1941, Jaipur. And then it goes on. So we'll keep in touch with this section and keep coming back here. So the other places that we didn't see in the map were all, I think, Ranchi. We all know where Ranchi is. Goa was mentioned on the coast. And if you
Yes.
remember, the trip was from Goa to Mehrabad. That was the trip. So yeah, I think yeah. How many pages to close? Oh, okay. So this still got quite a bit.
We can stop
Yeah.
here.
Yeah, we can stop here.
And the travel history of Baba is mind-boggling.
Yeah,
The
it's
way they
unbelievable.
traveled in the
This
train.
yeah, yeah. And this is in India. And then, of course, he has traveled also all over the world. So it's amazing to even see what he has done.
So one point was about
So,
the World War, right? That Chetti Baba was referring the World War. So
Yes.
yeah, it looks like Baba was managing, or I mean, some way there was a link between Chatti Baba and France. That's what is coming out
okay,
in the
okay.
war. This is the right in the war, right? 1939 to 1945 is World War II. So this is right in the middle of the war. So,
Okay.
and
And
if you go,
Sai Baba also handled one of the World War. That's what I remember.
that's
First
one,
or
one,
second?
one.
That
That's
was the
one.
first one. Okay.
That's the one. Yeah, 1914 to 1919. Right. So I think 1920s Sai Baba dropped his body. So if you look at it, this period was completely must activity. So right from 1940, 1939 is when the Bairamangala center was established, and he with that coincides with the beginning of the war. Archduke Ferdinand was assassinated in Europe, and then that I think that date matches the hit the put the what do you call? He put the stake in the ground, right? The Bhumi Pujan in Bairamangala. So that matches with the start of the war, and then all these travels, if you see, they end just after the war, right? 1947, a couple of years after the war. So till the obviously the war is represented by this heavy travel and heavy emphasis on uh, must. So
Must.
that's yeah. So interesting book, I should say.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's
All right.
complex actually, very
So
complicated.
yeah, yeah. I think he's made it unnecessarily complex. To be fair, I think Donkins could have been lighter on the language, but well. Anyway, so let's continue. So let's continue next weekend on Saturday from this point on.
Okay.
Everybody have a great rest of the Sunday and also a good week ahead. And let's catch up.
Sanjay ji can have the prayer.
Yes, of course, before we wrap.
हरि परमात्मा अल्लाह मस्त God Yazdahu Hari Paramatma Allah Ahuramast God Yazdahu Hari Paramatma Allahurmast 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 God Yazdahu अवतार मेर
अवतार
बाबा
मेहर बाबा
बाबा
की
की
जय।
जय।
जय बाबा।
जय बाबा।